There's this thing that's been going on since as the technology has advanced to sort of recreate, use AI, use different, whatever they call that now, like the face, what's the terminology? It's slipping my mind. Like where you can like, even if it's like a real actor, but you like take sort of AI and stuff and you can slap the guy's face onto some.
Well, there's like the de-aging stuff, but then there's
the
also
deep fake is what
the deep fakes, yeah.
Where it's, and it still kind of moves with them, but it's the other face. And kind of like the big, I don't know if it was necessarily the first one. I think there was some, even Marvel did it before maybe, but kind of the big one that the original was like Peter Cushing, who died decades ago. As Grand Moff Tarkin in Star Wars, where then they made Rogue One a Star Wars story, which centered in the timeline that he would have existed. And whoa, there he is again in the digital flesh, kind of recreating this character that had from an actor that had died, and like using old footage to generate the AI. And I mean, it's going back and watching that now, it's weird.
I remember at the time it was quite bad.
Yeah,
like it was like
there's a part of my fandom nostalgia that was like, but it was cool to see Grand Moff Tarkin again.
Yeah,
I think as time has gone on, I still think it's maybe the best of the new Star Wars movies. Like it's a great movie.
Yeah, for sure.
But it is very much like in sort of that uncanny valley, which is just like just means like it's off enough that it's unsettling. Like your eye, like your brain knows it's not real.
Yeah.
And it just sort of distracts you from the fact that, hey, that guy died, but there he is, looking younger than he did.
Yeah.
And there's sort of an ongoing, years later, and it's currently ongoing, where like a friend now has sued Lucasfilm, saying that actually Cushing had signed an agreement with him that they could never recreate him with technology unless he had permission, and sort of this ongoing kind of lawsuit. A more recent one, Alien Romulus, the most recent like Alien movie that came out a couple months ago.
Yeah,
brought back Ian Holm, the actor who died I think a couple of years ago, was in the first Alien as like an android guy, and there he is.
Oh yeah,
he appears once again, and kind of I mean just maybe yesterday I saw slightly different because it's not his appearance. Christopher Lee, the great Sir Christopher Lee. Well, actually, at least his voice, his wonderful, deep baritone voice, will be making a reappearance in the upcoming Lord of the Rings anime War of the Rohirrim. And I think they were actually just using like archival, like different takes. Like I don't know if they're using AI and stuff, but it's it's at least in the same umbrella of like, hey, this guy died, but like they're still making movies, post from the grave. They're still and kind of the one that has sort of made it the ongoing conversation is Robert Downey Jr., who is, I mean, most known for being Iron Man in the Marvel movies, was on a podcast just this week, the On with Kara Swisher podcast, in which they talked about that, saying, like, where the host sort of asks him, like, what are you going to do when like, you're gone? And it's like Marvel's like, hey, these people still aren't into comic book movies, but they liked that Iron Man movie like 40 years ago. Like, why don't we just have Robert Downey Jr. appear as Iron Man again?
Yeah.
Which he was not a fan of that. He made it very clear that he says, well, you're right. I would like to state right here, I intend to sue all the future executives just on spec. And Swisher notes, you'll be dead. To which he replies, but my law firm will still be very active.
Which is such a great line.
Yeah, I may be dead, but I'm still suing you.
Yeah.
And I will continue.
It's like, don't worry, there'll be people that'll take up that lawsuit on my behalf.
And it's just, like, I feel like there's been more examples of it, but it still feels like we're on the very, our toenail is just crossing the line of like the ability to do so, especially the more realistic. I think part of what has kept studios from doing this more is, one, it's expensive, and two, it's still, even though it's better than like even Cushing was 10 years ago, it's still that uncanny valley of like, they're there. I mean, like the Star Wars, the Mandalorian show, like brought back Luke, like a young Mark Hamill, and it's, I don't know, like it's like that's not Mark Hamill. Like he kind of looks, I get what they're going for, but like that's like a PlayStation 3 character in a movie. So I think but like it's getting better all the time. Like it will soon get to the point where you can't tell. I mean, even the deep fake stuff, you can't tell a lot of the time. Like it's slowly moving there. So I guess the question is just sort of like, do we want that? Is that good? Is that, even like as a Christian, like, is that moral? Like what do we do with this idea of like, is it is it wrong, like ethically, to bring back these dead actors and stuff from the grave to continue, even if they maybe give their permission ahead of time, like something, I
Yeah.
think Ian Holm, he didn't, but I think his wife or estate signed off on it. It wasn't like they're doing it like against his will necessarily, like, and his family's benefiting. He's getting the paychecks for
Right.
still making money from the grave, and and there's always been some sense of that, even with like toys, like is like selling your likeness. Like if you're Carrie Fisher, you make the movie, you get paid for your likeness. They make a Carrie Fisher Pez dispenser or like a toy, and you're still that's your face. But they're making money off of it. Like, is that a whole lot even different than like?
Yeah.
Well, we have this character's likeness, and now we can put you in other movies, and and even just again as a faith and pop culture podcast, like, is there a sense of like playing God with this? Of like,
Yeah.
we have the power over life and death. But what is your like? Are you weirded up with this? Are you
Yeah,
excited? You're
no.
usually more positive with the AI stuff than I am. So
Yeah,
curious
maybe, but I think in this case, I would probably be very much against it. I don't know that people are really interested in this. Like, I don't know that there's really a huge like clamoring for AI generated Grand Moff Tarkin to appear in a Star Wars movie. Like, I think it's one of those things, and I think you can see that by like the reaction to it was kind of like meh. Like, one, it wasn't all that great, or even the more recent with young Luke in the whatever was it, the Mandalorian,
Yeah,
that he
Mandalorian.
was in. So like, I just don't know that that was like we all can't wait to see young Luke, because the reality is you can go see young Luke in the movies he made when he was young. And so I just don't know that there's I know studio executives would, I feel like maybe they're the ones that are super interested in doing this kind of stuff. But I don't know that, like, going back to fandoms, I don't know how many people are really like clamoring for this, because again, like, even though, yeah, it's cool to see and it's kind of an interesting thing, it's still not that person. And I do think you get into some moral gray areas, because unlike a toy, you're now like this person is essentially acting on behalf of what we think they would have done in this performance based on what we know about them, but it's not them.
Yeah, like they're speaking line. Like they'll be, especially when you can't tell the difference in 20 years. Like
Yeah.
they'll be having said things, made creative choices
Right.
that you don't necessarily know. I do wonder though, like if some of the idea that people aren't interested in it, if some of that is maybe just because it's not as good yet. But like
It could be.
like you wonder, like in 20 years or something, it's like Lucasfilm is trying to get out of bankruptcy because they can't make a good Star Wars movie, and everyone tuned off, and it's like, you know what, like we're gonna all that new stuff we made, like forget it, scratch it. That's legends now. That's a sort of myth. Like we're gonna go back and make Episode 7 again with sort of the prime Luke, prime Han, Leia, and they're gonna interact, and they're gonna look
Yeah.
just like them, and we're gonna be able to tell these new Star Wars and what happened after the fact, and like I feel like in a world where that looked indistinguishable from real actors, which I think maybe we'll get to in our own lifetime.
Maybe.
Like you just wonder if there'll be a sense of like, well, like, if you remove the weirdness of like, they kind of move weird and their eyes are weird, and like you can very clearly tell that's not a real guy. I mean, one, because I know he's dead, but like two, just because he doesn't look like a real person. He's sort of glossy. Like I don't know. I feel like the temptation for, and I think some of it goes back to the conversation on fandoms of like, just we've grown up, and not that we need to grow out of our enthusiasms, but like it's hard to let go of the things that we, like it's hard to.
The things that you grew up on have a kind of a hold on you, I think.
Yeah, like for me, like Star Wars, they can make good Star. Hopefully, they start making good Star Wars stuff. Like, but like, Star Wars for me will always be the original, Leia, like the holy trinity of Star Wars. Like, that's always going to be, and like this idea that like, if they could make new Star Wars movies that still reflect what I as a child recaptured some of that. Like, I feel like there's going to be the temptation to do that, and I think even like the willingness to like, oh, that we can make a new Lord of the Rings, because they're making new Lord of the Rings movies. But what if they did that with the actors that actually looked like they did back in? Like, I don't know. I feel like that's going to be a hard genie to put back.
I think it will be, but I mean, also, even with all of the advances that we have now, and which they are great, I mean, I still think you can there's a different feel when like movies are done practically versus when they're done like all on the volume CGI and all kind of fake. And I mean, I think there'll be less and less of a difference. Like I know that gap is closing like fast, but I don't know. I think there still is going to be a place for like flesh and blood actors to make movies that I think will still always be better than like whatever concoction you make with AI and like laying over, whoever's face from way back when. I don't know that it will get to be that good.
Yeah, I know.
It could be, and I'm
It's
happy
going
to
fast
be
too.
wrong.
One of the interesting, if you've never seen it, go look it up. People have posted like LeBron James is like the oldest guy in basketball now. He's been playing for like 20 years or whatever. And like people have posted like images of what his character looked like in his rookie season for the NBA like video game, and then like what he looks like now. And like like one's this like polygon looks like anything like a
Yeah.
human being, and the other one is like that's a video game, that's PlayStation, that's not him.
Right.
Like
Oh yeah.
and like,
I mean, like,
in the span of his career, like drastic improvement.
oh sure.
Like you do know that it is getting better. And I think one of the things that may prevent people from diving headfirst into this is I think you're always going to be appealing to an older audience. Like sort of these sort of things are going to be like, hey, this older, like the young millennial, Gen Z or whatever, like, to ever bring back Robert Downey Jr. is going to be appealing to them as adults. Like it's like, hey, you like these characters back in the day, like let's give you them again. Like,
well, and I wonder too, like if in 50 years, that movie making process, and I think I saw Ashton Kutcher do an interview about this, but like you're just gonna like type in you're just gonna have a personal movie that's all AI
generated from the start.
and so it's like, well, I mean, so will it even really matter because like people can just go in and if whatever studio that you subscribe to has a for the premium feature is you can just generate your own movies. And like, I want to see, Luke Skywalker, expand on this scene and blah, 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 put in whatever your cute, your prompts are to the AI, and it spits out this really cool scene of Luke doing whatever. And maybe it's like a little mini series that you create for yourself. Like, I think it'll be, and what he says, I think is this movies will just kind of be unrecognizable from like what we call a movie today in like, 20 years from now. And so I don't even, it's hard to even know what all the ramifications are other than like, I don't know that we know.
Yeah. And we may know quick. 'Cause I do think, I mean, I'm an optimist with movies and think that I think there's something that's like by definition, like derivative about AI stuff that I feel like there will always be the real life humans that are making movies and stuff like, and you can't interview an AI person about your movie. I think there's some of the personalities that drive movies, and I think there'll always be some of that. Maybe the last thing is this kind of the question, like, is it like, as a Christian, like, is it morally wrong to do this? I don't know if you can make that case. Like, I think it's like, especially if it's like, I mean, it could be wrong if you didn't give permission, and
well, sure, yeah.
and then one day the AI generated Sam and the Faith and Pop Culture podcast season 68.
I show up to the studio and it's like, where are you guys at? It's like, oh, we've replaced you.
Yeah, like like that I can see as morally wrong. And other, if it's all done with agreement, not. But I do think there is thing that is questionable, and as a Christian, and I think it's sort of that idea of, I think the desire to have this sort of recreating dead people or old people into young people is driven by sort of this like heavy nostalgia. Like, it's like kind of fountain of youth drive of just like I think an inability for people to like just accept mortality and like, the fact that like childhood things and all things pass away. Like, the verse that came to mind was this Ecclesiastes 3, there's a time for everything. There's this idea that God created the world with rhythms, and one of those rhythms is life and death. And, and that's okay. Like, there's beauty in all those sort of, seasons, even the trees go through that rhythm every year. Like, that's part of God's design. And I think whether it's like unbiblical, I don't know, to like, recreate Robert Downey Jr. 50 years ago, but I do think it is icky, at least.
Yeah.
Like, like, I think it's okay for people to let things die and let things fade away, and like accept that, like, hey, I loved Harrison Ford, and like he made a lot of good movies, and he's the man. He's still the man, even though he's like 80 something.
Yeah.
But like in 20 years, he's probably not going to be alive anymore. And I'm okay with not having more Harrison Ford movies. Like,
Yeah.
I got some good ones, and I can watch those. And like, there's new actors that are maybe the next Harrison Ford for my kids' generation. And like, there's something healthy about that I think
Yeah.
we lose when there's this obsession of like, keep everything the same. Nothing can change. Everyone needs to still look young.
Yeah, I think that it's a really weird thing. I think and again, it kind of goes back to the control and everything too. Like, just wanting to keep everything like it was when you first experienced it. When you were 10 or 12 or whatever. And I think that, but the beauty of movies is you can go back and revisit your favorite actors in their prime in your favorite movies. Like, you can, like, there's no limit to how many times you can watch, A New Hope or whatever. And I think that's the thing, like, if you want to see your favorite actor when they were young, like, well, go watch them in one of the, and it's like, those are all there to be watched and to be enjoyed in perpetuity. Like, you can do that forever. And I just think that is going to be, I feel like, even more rewarding as an audience than some AI generated young version of your favorite actor in a movie that they may not have ever given their permissions to be in. Like, whether or not they are okay with using an AI generated like visage of themselves or not. Like, it's just, it won't, we'll know that it's not them. And I just think it will never be the same as like when they were young.
Yeah, and I just
making
wonder when
these
the
movies.
novelty will wear off. Like, it's kind of cool as a Star Wars fan to see a young Luke.
Yeah.
Even after we've had some of these examples, I think people are sort of like, but like, did we need him in this story? Like, do we need?
Right.
Do we? It's kind of fun for a moment. And,
At least for now, I think it's still very much a party trick.
yeah,
And I don't, when that will stop being a party trick, I don't know. And will it be worth viewing? I'm not
so
sure.
we'll see.
I have my doubts.
I feel like this is going to be a conversation that continues, and it's going to change, especially with some of these like lawsuits and things, and
Yeah.
just as the industry tries to itself figure out whether we need to do this.